Welcome back to the Straight Up Fight Network. This is an instant reaction to UFC 299, where we just witnessed one of the greatest masterclasses in striking that you will ever see. Sean O'Malley pitched a perfect shutout, winning every single round, 5-0, a 5-round shutout, getting the 50-45 on 2 scorecards, getting 50-44 on the 3rd scorecard, so even better than a 5-round shutout. If you had to think of every possible strike that someone can land in a fight, Sean O'Malley landed that in this fight. He landed hooks to both sides of the body. He landed straights to the head from both body positions. He landed straight rights to the body. He landed spinning attacks. He landed kicks to the head, body, everything. He landed virtually everything you could possibly land, and he landed all of them many times. When was the last time you watched a fight and one guy was ahead the entire way, and you're thinking the underdog's chance of a come-from-behind victory here is kick the legs? That's what we were watching here in this fight, where you're watching Sean O'Malley piece Marlon Vera up, but Marlon Vera is still alive because as long as he was standing, that guy is so durable that eventually Sean O'Malley is going to break himself trying to keep destroying Marlon Vera and keep trying to keep knocking him out. If this fight went on for 10 rounds, eventually Marlon Vera would be there with the victory. The path to Marlon Vera's winning was the path of the first fight. The first fight between these two, where Sean O'Malley ended up taking the leg kick and his leg just went numb, and that was it for him. I was sitting there watching the fight in the 4th and 5th rounds thinking, Chito's just got to try to punch O'Malley in the arm or kick him in the leg and hope that O'Malley's more brittle bone structure just breaks, and then he can just go win the fight like he did the first time. That was the path to Vera's victory. As you're watching the fight, were you thinking, oh my God, Vera's going to knock O'Malley out? Or were you thinking, oh my God, Vera can just absorb every strike, and eventually, what happened in the end of the fight is going to happen, where Vera's eventually going to land something to the body, or O'Malley's going to take something on the leg in a weird way, or fracture his wrist, and eventually the more brittle bone structure is going to give out, whereas Marlon Vera is made of an entirely different type of concrete. The guy is chiseled out of something that we need to investigate. It doesn't even make sense how many clean punches Chito was able to eat in this fight. And the amount of stance switching that O'Malley did, where he was putting all of himself into these shots, where he was, when he was in orthodox and his right hand was in the back, he put all of his weight into the right hand when he landed it, and then he just accepted being in southpaw and was immediately able to fire from southpaw using his left hand as the power punch there. And the amount of flush shots that Marlon Vera took, don't even get me started on the knee, the multiple knees. Maybe the only thing that O'Malley wasn't landing that much of was maybe hooks to the head. But the 1-2, the jabs were there all night. Everything was there. It's going to be a long time till you see a shutout pitched that cleanly. This was, from a Chito perspective, this was a Nate Diaz-esque getting shut out in 5 rounds, and you know that if the fight would have gone on for eternity, eventually Chito would have won. Not because of skill in this case. Chito clearly is showing he doesn't have the skill that O'Malley has, but just for whatever he's made up of, whatever Chito's bones consist of, eventually he will be the rock that O'Malley breaks himself upon. And I sincerely think that nobody that O'Malley ever fights again will take that amount of beating and still be standing. Chito took a worse, more brutal beating than Chris Moutinho did. against Sean O'Malley. I really believe we just watched one of the great masterclasses in UFC history of striking. And how nerve-wracking was that? How nerve-wracking was it when Sean O'Malley wins the first 3 rounds and you're watching as Sean has taken out all of the surprise of strategy, where now you know, okay, Sean already has the first 3, so Marlon Vera can't come back and try to take Sean down. He can't press him up against the cage. He can't just win the 4th round and 5th round. He literally needs to end the fight. And Sugar just needs to outlast the bell. That's all he's got to do. And you know what both guys are trying to do. And you know that Vera is not going to get finished. There was finally one point in the 5th round where O'Malley landed something and you could see it hurt Chito. Every other blow that landed didn't seem to shake Chito. Like, yeah, it literally shook him, where you saw Chito's head was visibly moving off the spot that it was. After the shots landed, you could see the movement. You could see the head snapping side to side and back. But there was never a reaction from Chito that said, I'm in trouble. I am going to go down and this fight's going to be called off. Until the 5th round, O'Malley finally broke that. The chink in the armor. But man, that body shot that Chito landed at the end of the fight, that was a killer body shot. You saw the way O'Malley went down right after the bell rang. That was because of that shot. That was an insane shot. But you knew with 5 seconds left, you knew the fight was already over at that point. So if there was another 15 seconds left in the fight, maybe O'Malley doesn't get hit with that until that timer goes down to 5 seconds left. So I don't think it's a case if there was another minute left in the fight that Chito would have won, but eventually, if there were enough minutes left in the fight, Chito would eventually be the victor. I think that's just what you have to say. And from Chito Vera's perspective, he should never, ever accept another fight in the UFC that is less than 5 rounds. Because when you have that kind of cardio and the kind of heart and the kind of invincibility to being knocked out that Chito has, he can go ahead and take a 5-round fight against anyone, lose rounds 1, 2, and 3, and there is still a solid chance that he will win in rounds 4 or 5. Because he cannot be knocked out. And when you cannot be knocked out, or virtually can't be knocked out, because I will say that Chito did get hurt in the 5th round, but when it seems like you cannot get knocked out, eventually the opponent can break. And Chito should not take 3-round fights where he's susceptible to being on the wrong end of poor judging, like he had when he fought Sang Yadong and he won 2 rounds out of 3 and the judges gave it to Yadong. If Chito fights 5-round fights against everyone from here on out, his win percentage, his percentage chance of winning, I should say, the betting odds on Chito in 5-round fights, Chito's going to be the favorite in virtually every matchup. Because you're betting on Chito, to bet against Chito, you're saying either someone has to basically pitch the shutout that O'Malley pitched, or Chito has to get knocked out. And the odds of somebody else fighting Chito and putting on this type of masterclass, or Chito getting knocked out, are really, really slim. And what can you say from the Chito perspective after that fight? This guy poured everything into this fight. He got beat 5-0 by a guy with the pink hair and the pink shorts, a guy who you would never dream is as tough as you, and he just got pieced up in front of his friends and family and in front of his nation of Ecuador, with all the fans there to support him. And now he has to go look himself in the mirror as a guy who was already working so hard and now say, I have to go back and work harder. And it wasn't a close fight. Man, brutal. Absolute brutality to the psyche of Chito Vera. He'll be okay. He's a tough, tough son of a gun. But man, that's a loss that has got to hurt. Yeah, his face, his arms and legs are going to be hurting certainly for a while. And so will O'Malley's. O'Malley limped out of the cage. His bone structure just is not built for 5 rounds of war like this. But the good news for him is that he just made it through the only guy who can probably make him connect with that many punches without going down. So from here out, O'Malley's going to be facing other guys. And we saw the O'Malley call out where he wants to fight against Topuria. Now that would be a really interesting fight because Topuria is sturdy. But Topuria can certainly be cracked by Sean. We saw Topuria get cracked by a guy with a similar build when he fought against Jai Herbert. And Sean is that similar tall, lanky guy. So Sean can land on Topuria. However, if Topuria lands on Sean, it's going to be a lot harder of a shot than Marlon Vera. Basically what I'm saying is, each of these guys has the complete and total ability to knock each other out. Whereas Vera really doesn't have the ability to knock Sean O'Malley out. He more so has the ability to break Sean O'Malley's will, spirit, and body. But Topuria can put Sean O'Malley unconscious. And Sean O'Malley can put Ilia Topuria unconscious. So that's what would make that fight very exciting because of the volatility that can go either way. Both guys knockout strikers, and both fighters susceptible to being KO'd by the other. So I'd really like to see that fight. I think it presents a really interesting challenge. Not that I wouldn't want to see Sean O'Malley fight against Merab. Even though Sean O'Malley already beat Aljo, who was mainly a wrestler, mainly a jiu-jitsu guy, and he beat him with advanced striking, and it's very likely that Sean O'Malley could beat Merab the same way. Moving side to side. When Merab commits, boom. Slip off and land a big left hand or a big right hand. Put Merab down the same way you put Aljo down. That's a possibility. Or Merab could ragdoll him for 3 rounds, and then Sean O'Malley could land it. Or Merab can ragdoll him the whole time. Who knows? But we've stylistically seen that fight before, so I do think that the volatility of the Topuria versus O'Malley fight would be very interesting. Whereas the Merab, it's kind of like, okay, we don't have the same volatility. Merab's not going to knock O'Malley out. Merab by decision versus O'Malley by KO would probably be the way that fight would be predicted. Versus O'Malley versus Topuria, it's like, okay, one of these guys is going to sleep at literally any second. It could be either one of them, and we don't know who. And that presents the ultimate volatility, the ultimate uncertainty, and the ultimate excitement. There were some other fights on this card as well. Let's look at a few of them. We had Dustin Porier going against Benoit St Denis. And I don't really understand the strategy from St Denis. St Denis was throwing in this fight as if it was a 3-rounder, but it was a 5-rounder. Despite the fact that St Denis was having some good exchanges in the wrestling, I think if this fight would have gone to rounds 3, 4, and 5, Topuria would have been in an unbelievably good position. Now, he didn't even need to rely on that because he knocked St Denis out. Porier went for like 4 failed guillotine attempts, trying to set the record for how many failed guillotine attempts you could have in the fight. And then he really even went for a guillotine after it was already apparent that he can crack St Denis on the feet. And this was a great example where you don't need to throw the harder shots to win the fight or to even get the knockout. Dustin wasn't putting all of his weight into shots. He was just throwing crisp, short shots. The short left hook was money. Absolute money. And he landed it a couple of times. He landed the short but precise uppercut and the short but precise hook. If you measured the power of St Denis' punches and the power of Porier's punches, it could be that St Denis can technically throw harder. But Porier's shots were far more precise, far sharper. Also, I think if unless St Denis was able to get a knockout, as you go into round 3, St Denis his gas tank was gonna go way down. Forget about rounds 4 and 5. St Denis would have collapsed from his own output. So stylistically, I think that Dustin Poirier, this was maybe not stylistically, but strategically, this was an incredibly strong selection of a fight for Poirier, where he was fighting against a guy who was, over the course of 5 rounds, putting himself in a terrible position. And I tweeted out during the fight that if Poirier makes it to a round 4, and the first 3 rounds go 2 for St Denis and 1 for Poirier, then Poirier is in an amazing position to win rounds 4 and 5 and win the fight, or to get rid of St Denis. But he didn't even need to come on to that, because he was the more precise fighter. And what a great victory for Dustin Poirier. He gets it done with a knockout in round 2. He only needs to fight for 7 minutes and 32 seconds. So basically 7.5 minutes of fighting for Poirier. Gets the victory, gets a KO on it, gets a TKO, gets the knockout, and he can go back in the right direction. He's still here. He's exactly the same Dustin that he was before the Gaethje knockout. It doesn't seem to have affected him and ruined his career like sometimes a vicious knockout will do. And that's a great sign for Dustin. For St Denis, I think this is pretty brutal, because first of all, we don't get to see what St Denis looks like in the championship rounds. So he doesn't get rounds 4 and 5. He didn't even make it to round 3, so we don't know what St Denis would look like if he had to go the distance. He doesn't get the experience going the distance. We also see that St Denis' striking wasn't as sharp. We see that he's susceptible to getting countered. He's susceptible to getting hit with short hooks. Even when he has the dominant grappling position, we see that Poirier was able to get out of it. So that's a lot of knocks on St Denis. Let's say St Denis goes and tries to fight a Charles Oliveira next. You think Oliveira's not going to land on him? You think St Denis is going to win the grappling exchanges against Oliveira? You think that St Denis is going to be able to take Oliveira into rounds 3, 4, and 5 and win? Who knows? We don't know what St Denis would look like in rounds 3, 4, and 5. Or maybe he's just never going to get there. Maybe St Denis is never going to see rounds 4 and 5 of a championship fight, because he's either going to get knocked out or he's going to knock the other guy out. Maybe that's just how it's going to go for him. But a tough night for St Denis. Not a night that we can necessarily say he can learn too much from. Sure, you can learn from fighting a veteran like Porier. You can learn from getting TKO'd. You can learn to be more defensively sound. But I think we see that there's holes in St Denis' game. And even if there weren't those holes, I don't think St Denis would have been able to go 5 rounds with that output against Porier, who's done 5 rounds a million times in his career. We move on to the previous fight, and we're not going to go beyond the main card here, but let's just go a little further. Kevin Holland got absolutely embarrassed by Michael Venom Page. You say that the fighting competition is weaker in Bellator, and for the most part I would agree that it is, but MVP looked so much better than Kevin Holland on the feet. It wasn't even close. MVP was routinely knocking Holland down and then mocking him and dancing. It seemed like Holland's sound defense, like where Holland previously in his career, he would fight like Thiago Santos, he fought Jacare, he fought guys who are monsters, and he was always able to thrive off not getting knocked out by these big, strong guys who possess a ton of power. But he wasn't able to roll with those shots here against the sharp Michael Venom Page. It seemed like there was a problem with the distance management from Holland, where MVP was able to, in his sideways stance, he was able to be in close enough to where he was able to put his whole self into the right hand, and they were landing pretty flush on Holland. If you don't think they were flush, then why was Holland on his back, looking up at the lights, looking up at MVP? And then MVP just clowned on him. He just styled on him. He was dancing. He didn't even try to go down and finish the fight. He didn't try to land ground and pound. He knew that there's no world in which Kevin Holland can get up and compete with him on the feet. When was the last time we saw Kevin Holland get embarrassed like that? Like, yeah, he did get submitted very early on, in the Khamzat Chimaev fight. But that's a case where Chimaev is very dangerous within the first minute or the first couple of minutes, and then after that, the gas tank can become an issue, and Khamzat's not nearly as dangerous as we saw from the two fights that Kevin Holland did one against Gilbert Burns, where he barely won, and one against Kamaru Usman, where he barely won. Let's look at Kevin Holland's previous fights. So he just lost, and then he lost the previous fight to Jack Della Maddalena, but that was a closer fight. It was a split decision. Then he beat Chiesa, he beat Ponzinibbio. He lost to Stephen Thompson in a fight where perhaps he could have won if he would have tried to use the grappling against Stephen Thompson, but he just, first of all, he broke his arm, and he was also content to just strike with the karate champion, Stephen Thompson. He lost to Khamzat Chimaev. That was the quick Darce choke at 2 minutes and 13 seconds. He beat Tim Means. He beat Alex Oliveira. He had a no contest against Kyle Dawkins with a headbutt. He lost to Marvin Vittori by unanimous decision. Derek Brunson by unanimous decision. He beat Jacare. He beat Joaquin Buckley a while back. He beat Anthony Hernandez a while back. But Kevin Holland's never looked like this. He's never been embarrassed in the striking like this. Yes, he lost fights. He lost fights to Wonderboy, where Wonderboy got the better of him over the course of 4 rounds. And he lost to Khamzat Chimaev in a very different way, but nobody's beat him up on the feet like this to the point where Kevin Holland really couldn't do anything, and Kevin Holland was able to use his full arsenal, and he just couldn't do anything with it. This was the most embarrassing loss of Kevin Holland's career. MVP was MVP from the second he stepped with his music, and he was MVP on his way out. And that guy just looked like aces tonight. In the prior fight to that, you had Gilbert Burns going against Jack Della Maddalena, and I actually thought Gilbert Burns won round 1, and I thought Gilbert Burns won round 2. Not because he landed mostly the better strikes, but it was because of the grappling exchanges. And Della Maddalena, he landed some punches in bunches, but they were not the more powerful shots. Gilbert Burns was winging more powerful shots, and he was doing better in the grappling. But Della Maddalena showed a couple of things that are very important, not just for the way he was able to win this fight, which was gigantic, and he deserves a ton of credit for it. Because it's a very difficult thing to do when you know you're down 2 rounds and still set up the knockout. That's not easy. Not easy at all to do what Jack Della Maddalena did in this fight. But what he did so incredibly well, which bodes greatly for him in the future, is first of all, we know that if he goes against a superior grappler, he can hold his own, he can not get submitted, he can get out of really bad positions and get back up to his feet and then take advantage of the striking. The levels between him and Gilbert in the striking were pretty vast, and Della Maddalena showed that he has more weapons than just his hands. That knee was no hesitation. He had one shot to get that. He finally got out of the position, and he did it in a crafty way. He got out of the bottom position, got out, immediately recognized Gilbert is about to shoot, intuitively, instinctively, went for the knee, and met Gilbert's chin on the way in, and that was it. Gilbert Burns does not have a Chito Vera chin. He's been rocked many times in his career. And Della Maddalena with the no hesitation knee, it was instinctive. He knew exactly when to throw it. So Della Maddalena showing he has more weapons than we thought, and he has the grappling to where he can go against the grapplers of the division, hold his own until he can take advantage of the striking and win. And that is enormous, because when you're a striker on the level of Della Maddalena, the question becomes, well, what's going to happen when you face the grappler? And here, he faced the grappler and still knocked him out. Potentially down 2 rounds to none. Absolutely killer come from behind victory for JDM. And then in the last fight that we're going to look at, you had Petr Yan winning a decision against Song Yadong. The first round went to Song Yadong, and Petr Yan didn't do very much. And then you're watching as round 2 is halfway over, and you're wondering, what happened to Petr Yan? He just doesn't look like the same guy who he was back when he had all the confidence when he was fighting against Aljamain Sterling the first time. What happened to all the confidence from back when he fought against Uriah Faber? And then it changed. Petr Yan showed that he's still Petr Yan. He was doing nifty maneuvering. He was punching and sliding in and going for interesting wrestling maneuvers, and he was able to really damage Song Yadong. And then there was another point in the fight where he realized that if he kept his arm out at distance, he was able to keep himself defensively sound. Song Yadong started landing less and less and less. Petr Yan started landing more and more and more. And what a phenomenally exciting come from behind way of taking rounds 2 and round 3. And by the end of it, it was pretty much obvious that Petr Yan won the fight. And that's fantastic because there was a point there halfway through round 2, which is halfway through the fight, where you're like, wait a second, has Petr Yan's time come and gone? And no, the master of sport is still a master. And he can still do some really awesome things in the cage. And it would still be exciting if he came back and got to another Sean O'Malley title fight, which, hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Petr Yan is still behind Merab. He's still behind other guys, but at least he's able to show that he still is an exciting fighter. He's still a durable fighter. He still has all the tricks, the trips, the wrestling. He can mix it up. And as the fight goes on, he gets stronger. So putting Merab aside, if Petr Yan, he's another guy, he should take 5-round fights. You know what would be a great fight? Petr Yan fighting against Chito Vera. I don't believe those guys have ever fought before. Right? Let's look at Chito's Tapology or something. Let's look at Chito. Let's see all of Chito's past bunch of fights. I don't believe he's ever fought against Petr Yan. Okay, so Chito just lost to Sugar. He beat Pedro Munoz. He lost to Corey Sandhagen. Beat Dominic Cruz. Beat Rob Font. Beat Frankie Edgar. Beat Davey Grant. Lost to Aldo. Beat O'Malley with the perennial nerve kick. Lost to Song Yadong in a fight that he really won. And then he beat Andre Ewell and then a whole bunch of other guys. He's never fought Petr Yan. And that would be a great fight because you can make that a 5-round main event. And both of these guys, slow starters, they pick up the further the fight goes. And both of these guys are extremely durable, virtually impossible to knock out. And that's going to be a 5-round war where I suspect over the course of 5 rounds, Petr Yan will eventually get the better of Marlon Vera with his craftiness and with his ability to mix it up in the wrestling and just being a little bit more creative, a little bit more defensively sound than Marlon Vera. But Vera will have his moments, and that would be a really, really good fight and a natural one to make following UFC 299. Again, story of the night, Sugar Sean O'Malley putting on one of the most clinical master classes that you will ever see on any lineup of fights, anytime. And it's going to be a while till we see somebody put together a performance like that where you're pitching a complete shutout for 5 complete rounds in utter domination. This is the Straight Up Fight Network.